Ba weep, grana weep, ninny bong YouTube. RedWhiteandBluestreak here, and
we question what deity would allow such a thing to exist.
So, for starters, Studio Series is essentially the poor man's masterpiece. It offers supreme screen accuracy and articulation that is only rivaled by Masterpiece and third-party offerings. But this toy falls way short of that. So I previously reviewed the War for Cybertron Optimus Prime from this line on the channel, and technically, at least in terms of number, he's the last one in the wave, with Barricade and Bumblebee taking up the 1 and 2 slot respectively. Starting with the robot mode so we can get the negatives out of the way. On first glance, that's pretty good! The proportions are almost spot on. He scales well with the other figures in the wave, the colors are well matched with the actual game model, and the sculpted detail is pretty on par with what we'd expect from War for Cybertron. However, the yellow part for the eyes on the face is way too big and kind of meshes in with other parts of the face. Honestly, he looks more like a dying prowl with all that yellow. The hands being open creates clearance issues for the transformation, which we'll get into in a second. Trust me, we won't be in this mode too long. This toy lacks substance, so this review won't be long. The kibble management is pretty atrocious considering how much it messes with another aspect of the robot mode, which once again, we'll get into in a second. And the Decepticon insignia is the wrong kind! You might be wondering what I mean by that. Let me elaborate. So, to my knowledge, there are 3 different kinds of versions of the Autobot and Decepticon symbols that exist on the figures, or just throughout the franchise as a whole. There are the messier, cartoon-accurate symbols that you'll typically see on Masterpiece figures or on my third-party figures that I have. There are the cleaner, more modern symbols that you'll see on mainline figures as they come out. And then there are the movie symbols, which are slightly different for some reason. Slight amendment to that, I also forgot to mention, technically the comic symbols count as something different as well. So in the case of the Decepticon symbol, they, for some reason with the Michael Bay movies, decided to make the eyes more of a different angular shape rather than the triangle that you'll typically see on the modern and cartoon accurate symbols for the Decepticons. So with that in mind, this symbol is definitely wrong. Even the vehicle mode isn't safe from this error. But in all honesty, that becomes the least of this toy's issues when you consider things like the kibble management and, worst of all, the lack of articulation. The head is on a very tight swivel, but if you put in enough effort, you can get his head to turn side to side. The arms can move around part of the way, both upward and downward. Mainly the backpack that's in the way. The arms can move out to about there. There is a bicep swivel, and the hands are on one of the tightest swivels known to man. The waist is also on a tight mushroom peg swivel. He can split out about that far, but he can kick forward all the way, which is nice. And backwards all the way. There's a slight bend at the knee, if you can really consider that. And I guess the feet can hinge upward, but that's mainly for the transformation. I think I finally fully understand Jobby the Hong's distaste for a lack of articulation. There are hardly any poses you can get this guy in outside of just raising his arm to accommodate his one accessory. This toy has what I'm gonna call Happy Meal engineering. Patent pending. His arms don't even go outward all the way, leaving him in a wide A pose at most, making him immediately less dominant than his Gamer Edition brethren. The head and waist joints are way too freaking tight, which, speaking of head, I hate how they engineered this. Most mainline and even third-party figures have a stationary ball joint post going from the torso into the head, with a bit of play in terms of how snug the peg is in the head, allowing for a wide range of motion. For some ungodly reason, they decided to use a double-sided ball peg going between the head and the body, without making sure the head doesn't sit too snug on its end, resulting in an absolutely absurdly hard to turn and impossible to tilt head. So yeah, no head. Along with that, the kibble messes with the articulation way too much. The knees can't bend anywhere near 90 degrees, to the point where I can hardly even call whatever's going on with the duck feet articulation. Because when on earth are you ever going to make use of this with a leg that can hardly even utilize it? And no ankle pivot? Unforgivable! I mean, at least he can stand pretty well. I wondered before if this was just a result of the leg not having a cut that can accommodate that kind of bend, but no! Look! You could clearly bend the leg way past 90 degrees, but the leg kibble keeps spanking him like me as a child when you bend the knee. Then there's the ball joints at the hips. He could totally get more of a spread with his legs if there was just a cut at the ball joint to allow it. But even then, the kibble here would just bump into the side, though in this case it's fine. I honestly can't really think of a place where you could put that kibble outside of maybe the inside of the leg, so I'll excuse it just this once. Moving up to the arms, I can't quite excuse much besides the shoulders. Based on that cut, they tried what they could, but the rotation around is another story. They definitely could have added a hinge to this backpack kibble to make it a little bit smaller, which wouldn't mess with the game accuracy, and would have allowed for a full range of motion at the shoulder in terms of rotating the arm around. Because man, that backpack is massive! You could fit the entire Kingdom of Hyrule in there. And the hands could have gotten an easy fix considering how under-engineered the rest of the figure seems to be. The tight swivel could be fixed if instead they decided to use a combination of a hinge and a mushroom peg at the wrist. And with regards to the transformation that we'll go over in a second, the clearance issues could be fixed if they just went with a closed hand like the other bots, or at least with the hands a little bit less relaxed. As for the elbows, the forearms aren't even visible in robot mode. So they easily could have made a bit more of a cut at the forearm for the sake of articulation. He can't even hit the gritty! 0 out of 10! In all seriousness, he definitely falls short of what I consider worthy of the Studio Series line. And before you come at me in the comments, which please comment, I love the interaction, I know for sure that it's the forearms that are holding the bend back, because look! Mother... He comes with a neutron assault rifle, which I mentioned during the Optimus Prime review, and the gun itself looks nice enough despite needing a splash of color, but with your crappy articulation, you don't deserve it. Pop that thing on Prime and I can finally recreate that cover pose. At least you did something good. Besides the alt mode. Is it weird that I find myself humming Dispersion Relation whenever I transform these toys? Ah, what the heck, I gotta enjoy something here. You know what? No, this is easier. This is a lot easier. Just... Well, outside of the clearance issues with the hands, the transformation is pretty great, all things considered. And the resulting alt mode is actually pretty fantastic, despite the one flaw in the hood, which actually is a little annoying. You see, it's pretty clear that they prioritized the alt mode over the robot mode, which is not something that I'm a very big fan of. You see, most of the time when collectors buy these transformers, they're going to be displaying them on the shelves. You buy the giant transforming robot because it's a giant transforming robot, not because it's a giant transforming car. But talking purely about the vehicle mode, it looks amazing. It's pretty much spot on with the game model. There are no robot mode bits showing from any angle of the top, and hardly any underneath. Everything is hidden away very well. As for how it feels, well, there's a reason I use the term Happy Meal engineering. The plastic here feels pretty different from Prime, not as dense and more akin to a kid's meal transformer in my opinion. That is to say, not as bad as Magic Square Doomsday, but Not at all as good as anything from the Studio series typically. It's kind of a not-so-nice middle ground. I mean, in alt mode, this thing just straight up feels like a toy car from a kid's meal, which, if this was a kid's meal toy, this thing would be amazing, outstanding, masterpiece level as far as Happy Meal Transformers go. But it's Studio Series, a figure line targeted at adults and teens that grew up with or feel some sort of attachment to the IP or part of the continuity that it's referencing. So it's pretty weak by those standards. I mean, at least you got a fan leg mode here, but I doubt you're really going to be combining this guy onto anything. The weapon can also be stored here, but... And your gun rights were already revoked, so let's just wrap this up in a nice McDonald's-shaped bow. For starters, I'm not loving it. The engineering on this thing would be pretty standard if it came out during the original War for Cybertron line, but here, compared to his wave mates, he feels subpar at best, which is a shame because I love War for Cybertron Barricade, and this guy definitely looks good. He's just engineered like if Tonka decided to make a Transformer, a nice transformation with lackluster articulation. I mean, I'm not looking for third-party or masterpiece level articulation and engineering, but come on now. It's gonna be a 1 out of 5 from me. I can't really recommend this unless you're a psychopath like me that wants to complete the entire line. And God help Hasbro and Takara if they decide to engineer Megatron the same way. Definitely the weakest Studio Series figure I've ever handled. Man, after that I need to get into something with some actual articulation.